welcome to this third session in our second teacher education breakout strand today. I hope you've been enjoying the conference so far. I'm delighted to be able to welcome Lucy Shakespeare from University of Regent's University. Thank you, Lucy. How are you this morning?
Yeah, fine, thank you.
Excellent. This is, I think, going to be a really interesting talk on teacher wellbeing. So I'll very briefly introduce you, and then I'll hand you over to the participants. But for those who are watching, if you have comments or questions or just things you want to say in general, share with other participants, you can use the chat box. If you have some questions you would like to ask Lucy in particular, please use the Q&A box, the Q&A section. And at the end of the session, I'll be taking those Q&As and asking questions rather, and asking Lucy. So plenty of opportunity to interact with each other today. And I'm delighted to have Garen, who is helping on the chat as well. So thank you, Garen, for your help today. Lucy is a senior English language teacher at the Regent School of English in London. Over 10 years experience as an English teacher, as a Delta trainer, and a director of studies, examiner, and having worked all around the world, from Vietnam and Malaysia to Italy, in a variety of different school locations. It seems like, Lucy, you are an excellent person to share your thoughts and knowledge on the areas of teacher well-being. So thank you again for speaking today. I'll be quiet now and let you do your session. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Ben. Hi, everyone. As Ben said, I'm Lucy Shakespeare, and I'd like to welcome you all to this session where we'll be exploring the importance of teacher trainers fostering well-being in the teachers that we train, and if we should be doing more. As Ben said, we'd like to make this session as interactive as possible. So you're welcome to type your comments in the chat box. Make sure that you click send to everyone so that we can all see them. And you can also participate by answering some survey questions during the presentation by scanning the QR code or logging into minty.com with the code shown on the screen at the relevant points. So let's start with an overview of what we will be looking at in the next 35 minutes or so. So firstly, we will consider what well-being is and why it's so important in this profession. We'll then move on to look at the role that teacher trainers could play, and we'll think about practical strategies for promoting and maintaining well-being, both on teacher training courses such as CELTA and Delta, and in educational institutions themselves. And then we'll finish by reflecting on the benefits of teacher well-being for students, teachers, and the educational institutions they work for. So, what is well-being? I would like you all to think about the first word or phrase that comes into your head when you hear the word well-being. And you can either scan the QR code or log into minty.com with the joining code that is shown on the screen to type your answers. So if you could all start doing that now. Got some really interesting responses coming through there. The word balance features quite a lot. So balance, emotional balance, balanced, healthy life, feeling refreshed, holistic health. Balance is definitely something that we will come back to later on in the presentation. Feeling motivated, calmness, creativity, that's an interesting one. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for your responses there. Let's move on now to think about the dictionary definition of well-being. So the Cambridge Dictionary simply defines it as the state of feeling happy and healthy. The World Health Organization goes a bit further and uses a broader definition, which, as you can see on the screen, focuses on the quality of life and the ability of people to contribute to the world with a sense of purpose. And then lastly, psychologists Deci and Ryan argue that well-being results from a subjective, positive evaluation of the quality of life. So moving on from general definitions of well-being to think about teacher well-being and why it's so important. And I think this is something that really came into sharp focus during the COVID pandemic. During this time, the idea of teacher well-being became incredibly important, and hopefully it continues to be so today. So I think there are four key areas to focus on here. First of all, the mental health impact. So teaching, as we all know, is a demanding profession with high levels of stress, burnout, and mental health challenges. This is true in so-called normal times, and obviously during the pandemic, the situation got worse, and the British Council, in fact, found that 62% of EFL teachers reported increased levels of stress and anxiety due to the challenges posed by the pandemic and also the transition to online teaching. Secondly, performance and productivity. So a teacher's well-being directly influences their effectiveness and their productivity in the classroom. Next, well-being is inextricably linked to student outcomes. Positive teacher well-being leads to better student engagement, learning, and overall achievement. A study in 2021 by Kim and Asprey reported that during the pandemic, 77% of teachers experienced higher stress levels, which adversely impacted their teaching effectiveness and student engagement. Finally, retention rates. High levels of well-being help to retain experienced and effective teachers. So let's now think about the role that teacher trainers currently play in promoting teacher well-being. I imagine that we have a mix of teachers and teacher trainers in this session today. So I'd like you to think about the teacher training that you attended, and that could be pre-service training or in-service training, along with any continuing professional development that takes place in your organization now. So on the screen, there are three statements. Firstly, the teacher training course I attended included content on looking after your well-being. Secondly, professional development sessions at my school include sessions on teacher well-being. Thirdly, educational institutions place enough importance on the well-being of their teachers. So I'd like you all to, again, join with the QR code or the joining code on menti.com and say how far you agree or disagree with these statements. I'll give you around 30 seconds or so to think about them. Okay, so quite an interesting response again there. So with the first statement, I think you mostly strongly disagree or disagree that the training course that you attended included content on well-being. Kind of a mixed response to the second statement. So sort of in the middle there. So some of you agree that the professional development sessions at your school include teacher well-being sessions, but some of you disagree, so kind of mix. And then the final statement, again, kind of leaning towards the strongly disagree and disagree that educational institutions place enough importance on the well-being of their teachers. Okay, thank you very much for your responses there. So let's move on now to think about what role teacher trainers could play in promoting well-being. And here there are four main ways in which trainers can make a difference. Firstly, trainers can provide an essential support system, not only for new teachers, but also for more experienced teachers. Secondly, trainers can help teachers to develop the skills needed to manage stress and to maintain a work-life balance. They can also act as role models, so they can demonstrate the healthy practices that they're teaching. And then finally, trainers can help to influence school culture by prioritizing well-being in professional development sessions. And I think when we think about the role that teacher trainers could play, we also need to think about the role of the teaching institution itself. So how can teacher trainers and schools help to promote a culture of well-being? Firstly, integrating well-being and skills development into both pre- and in-service training. And secondly, institutions implementing robust well-being policies. And I think it's crucial that these two approaches are considered in tandem. And we're now going to focus on each of them in turn. So how can teachers be helped to develop the skills needed to manage stress and maintain a healthy work-life balance? The key thing to start off with here is that we need to explicitly integrate well-being as a topic into both pre-service and in-service training. And this can include practical, useful sessions that will help teachers to, for example, recognize the signs of the potential signs of burnout and to manage their stress. And we'll be looking at some of these practical ideas in a minute. And then I think if well-being is explicitly addressed in training courses, then this will help to raise awareness of mental health generally, and hopefully also help to reduce the stigma attached to mental health issues in our profession and more widely. Progress has already been made in this area, but as trainers and also as academic managers, we could be doing more. So let's look more now at specific ways of managing stress that trainers can introduce into their sessions, which teachers can then in turn use with their own students. Raising awareness of emotion regulation skills and cognitive reappraisal techniques, teaching practical techniques such as breathing exercises, mindfulness exercises, and relaxation techniques. These strategies are all closely connected and can be introduced together. In 1998, Edward Gross, who is an emotion researcher at Stanford University, He proposed a theory called the process model of emotion regulation. And as the diagram on the screen shows, as an event or a situation starts, we assess how we plan to deal with that situation, and then we respond accordingly. And he said that any emotions that we have can either be helpful or unhelpful. But he also argued that at each stage, our emotions about the situation can be regulated. So, for example, we can choose which situations we want to be in or not if we feel uncomfortable in them, or we can modify the situation to make us feel more comfortable. So by way of example, in our context, a teacher can, to a certain extent, select situations such as lesson topics or activities which are likely to make them feel more confident, and they can avoid anything that they might find too stressful or uncomfortable. Another example would be that they can manage the classroom interaction patterns by choosing the seating arrangements or the pairings. And then if an activity isn't going well in class, a teacher can modify it. For example, by simplifying the task or by providing more scaffolding and support to the students. In the next stage, we can regulate our emotions by choosing to direct attention towards or away from the emotional aspects of a situation. So this might, for example, mean in a challenging class, focusing your attention on the students who are engaged, praising their positive behavior rather than being frustrated by those who are being disruptive. And then in the third stage, which is probably the most important stage, teachers can be trained to reframe stressful situations positively. And these are also known as cognitive reappraisal techniques. For instance, trying to view a challenging class as an opportunity to develop stronger classroom management skills, or a particularly tricky grammar question as an opportunity or a chance to learn about that grammar point. So this involves kind of flipping your mindset, and it certainly isn't easy, and it definitely requires a lot of practice. And then the final stage is response modulation, in which teachers can learn to effectively manage their response to challenging situations. And here trainers can teach practical techniques such as using breathing exercises, mindfulness exercises, and relaxation techniques. And they can also look at ways of staying calm and maintaining a positive tone, even if the students are being disruptive and the situation is really frustrating for them. I highly recommend Gross's talk on emotion regulation, which you can find on YouTube. He goes into a lot more detail about how the process model works and why emotion regulation is so important. And I think including training on emotion regulation skills in pre-service training courses like CELTA could certainly help new teachers to manage their anxieties in a new and often daunting situation, and to learn coping mechanisms that they could put into practice. And then for more experienced teachers, having these skills to draw upon could help any teacher to manage a particularly difficult class, student, or situation. And the really great thing about introducing these skills in teacher training sessions is that teachers can then make use of the ideas with their own students. So for example, helping exam students to deal with exam day anxiety, or more generally training students to reframe their thoughts, and rather than thinking about making mistakes as a negative thing, embracing them in a more positive way. So emotion regulation is really important for both teachers and students, and can help to have a positive impact on the effectiveness of the teaching, the learner engagement. It can influence the classroom dynamics and generally help to create a more positive atmosphere in the classroom. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts and comments on incorporating emotion regulation skills into training. Have any of you already done this in your training sessions? And also, have you talked about ways of managing and regulating emotions with your students? Please type your ideas about this in the chat box. Okay, so I can see that Sophia has commented saying that you're going to use this in the future and you're going to trial it this summer, so that's brilliant. Bruno, you missed the question. So basically, I'm wondering if you have used emotion regulation skills in your training, or have you discussed emotion regulation with your students? And thank you, Ben. So you've in fact used this idea of emotion regulation with your team members, but not on students or teacher education courses, but you think it's a great idea. I completely agree. And Isabella says that you've discussed this topic with your students, showing them your full emotional support. That's brilliant. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your responses there, guys. Christina is also saying you haven't used it with your in-service teachers yet, but you're planning to. That's fantastic. Okay. So lots of different ideas coming through there. Most of them positive about the use of emotion regulation skills. So that's great. Okay, so I'd like to move on now to think about teacher feedback and helping teachers to manage their time. So one of the main ways of helping a teacher to improve their well-being is by helping them to gain confidence and to build their self-esteem. Thus, managing feedback that we give them as trainers and also academic managers in a positive way is also fundamental. And I think here it's really important to make feedback a regular part of a training course or a work routine if we're thinking about in-service training, as it helps to reduce any anxiety that teachers have about receiving feedback, and they get used to the process. Equally, it should be framed as a positive thing to help improve their teaching rather than, as is sometimes the case, used only to highlight weaknesses. I think making the feedback collaborative is a good way to do this, so that teachers can share their own perspective of how a lesson went, and trainers can then give balanced and constructive feedback with specific examples of both strengths and areas needing improvement, so that teachers can go away with something concrete to work on. And then at the same time, encouraging teachers to reflect on their own professional development can also help them to raise awareness of their personal well-being. Keeping a reflective diary or a journal can be an effective way of doing this. And then finally, trainers could also provide advice about effective time management strategies. For instance, helping them to learn how to prioritize tasks, to exploit the digital tools that they have access to, and to manage their workload efficiently. So, having thought about how to integrate wellbeing into training courses and professional development generally, let's turn to what schools and trainers in schools can do to build on this training and how they can help to promote and maintain teacher wellbeing on a day-to-day basis. And obviously here, each school or educational institution operates in a specific environment with different operational, budgetary, geographical or cultural constraints. So it's not possible to be too prescriptive here about specific wellbeing policies that could be implemented. So these ideas kind of act as guidelines for best practice. It's important to implement and encourage school-wide policies that prioritize well-being. But what does this actually mean? Well-being is a term that gets thrown around quite a lot and overused nowadays, and it can be vague in its application. Organizations sometimes create policies which just pay lip service to the concept of well-being just to satisfy their funders or other stakeholders. So to this end, it's crucial to involve teachers and other staff members in the development of wellbeing policies. Consult people to find out what would actually be of practical use to them, and thus create a collaborative environment where they feel that their input is being valued. Everybody has a different approach to wellbeing and what would be beneficial for them. By consulting staff, it prevents a situation arising where these so-called wellbeing initiatives are inaccessible or simply ineffective for the teachers. And this is also the stage where a teacher trainer's input can be invaluable in helping to shape a school's policies. They're well placed to comment on the initiatives that would actually be beneficial for the teachers that they have trained or that they continue to train. Once established, any wellbeing policies and specific initiatives actually need to be communicated and publicized to all teachers. There's limited use in having a library full of resources or a wellbeing hub if the teachers aren't aware of them. One of the key aspects of a successful wellbeing policy is the opportunity to proactively help teachers achieve and maintain a healthy work-life balance. Again, this will depend on operational restrictions, but some things that we can consider here are constantly monitoring teacher workload so that they aren't overloaded, offering flexible working where possible, working hours, remote working. Again, obviously it will depend on the operational constraints. Establishing clear communication boundaries. So setting out specific hours where teachers can communicate with management and vice versa, and define the expected response times. And then making sure that everybody sticks to these apart from in urgent cases. Providing adequate administrative support to reduce the burden of time-consuming non-teaching tasks. And again, obviously that depends on the levels of administrative support available in the institution. And I think in terms of maintaining a healthy work-life balance, managers can lead by example here, so they can model a healthy work-life balance. It's essential that teachers feel that they can approach management if they're struggling with their well-being and or mental health. Open and honest communication about this should be encouraged for the benefit of the teacher and the organisation so that suitable help can be offered. Regular check-ins can be carried out with all teachers to discuss their well-being and to offer support and guidance. This acts as a preventative measure, allowing any well-being challenges to be both acknowledged and addressed before they start to impact on a teacher's ability to manage their workload and to have a knock-on negative effect on their students. As well as having an open channel of communication with management, it's a good idea to also have a network of peer support where experienced teachers can support newer teachers, which can help to reduce feelings of isolation, particularly in a new country or a new environment. Obviously, whilst open and honest communication is the ideal, there will be teachers who don't feel comfortable speaking about this with their employer, but they do still need some kind of professional counselling or psychological support. And here, employers are in a position to be able to help a teacher find access to the right kind of support. And in some countries, such as the UK, they would in fact have a duty of care and must do all that they reasonably can to support their employees' health and well-being. And that would involve also helping them to get access to external support. And the final point to touch upon here in relation to implementing wellbeing policies is that any policies or initiatives in place should be regularly evaluated, and any adjustments or improvements can then be made. And again, an inclusive approach should be promoted here. For example, an effective, perhaps anonymous feedback mechanism would allow teachers to suggest improvements to the existing policies. So by incorporating these examples of good practice into the fabric of professional development and school culture, teacher trainers and managers can create an environment where teachers' well-being is prioritised. There are obvious multiple benefits for teachers, including reducing stress, increasing levels of job satisfaction, and from the point of view of professional development. So up to this point, we've focused mainly on teacher well-being, but what is the impact on students and the educational institutions themselves? In 2021, IATEFL reported that 68% of EFL teachers felt that professional development focused on well-being and resilience helped them to better support their students' emotional needs during the pandemic. So my final question for you all is, how does improved teacher well-being impact on students and educational institutions? If you could please type your ideas in the chat box again. So Sophia says improved energy, improved positivity, definitely. Irada, if I pronounced your name correctly, improving your self-esteem. Everyone performs better when they're not on fight or flight mode. Better empathy for your learners, absolutely. If you feel fully supported, that would improve your energy in the class. You also have time to plan proper lessons for them, absolutely. It also improves the group support among teachers. Okay, again, some fascinating responses there. Thank you. So I think you've actually touched upon some of the most significant benefits for students, and that is that teachers have more energy, and therefore they're able to create more engaging and innovative lessons. If they're feeling well themselves, then they're more likely to be able to provide support in the classroom and act as role models for the students, who, especially younger learners, can then model the teacher's behaviour and learn to understand the importance of having a healthy work-life balance. There are more concrete benefits as well. So numerous studies show support the correlation between teacher well-being and student academic performance and outcomes. And as well as helping the students, this also helps the institution to improve or maintain its academic reputation. Prioritizing teacher well-being also helps to attract and keep high-quality staff, which in turn reduces costs. Overall, a more positive school environment leads to better teacher-student interactions and a healthier working environment. Therefore, I cannot stress the importance of teacher well-being enough. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that the session has been of some use to you. If you do have questions, please type them in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them.
Thank you very much, Lucy. A really fascinating presentation, and I think we can tell from the reactions to the chat box how important an area this is.
Can't keep up with the chat box, to be honest.
There's been so many comments, and there's
lots
been
of
really,
comments.
I think, recognition that this is an under-researched and under-prepared for and under-supported area. So I think really important that you've been able to talk about this during the session this morning. So thank you very much, Lucy. We do have a couple of questions, which I'll ask you just from the chat box. So, sorry, in the Q&A. Bruno, I think, is based in South America, has asked about how we can balance work life when we're professionally multitasked and we're working, we're taking courses, we're doing more than one job. How can we try and maintain that work-life balance in those kind of situations?
I think that's a really important question. Thank you, Bruno. And I think that's something that all of the parties involved need to think about, particularly the institutions themselves. So they need to think about not overloading teachers with heavy workloads. They need to think about allowing teachers, providing teachers with enough time to be able to maintain a healthy work-life balance, having time to focus on their self-care as well. But at the same time, it's also about teachers themselves being able to kind of reflect on their own schedule, realize when maybe they're overloading themselves, taking on too much, what I talked about in terms of reflecting on your professional development, so that you can also think about your well-being at the same time. I think that's really important.
Really nice, Keith. That's a nice point. Thank you. And I think as an indication of how supportive and useful this session is, Sophia has asked if she can recommend this workshop and conference for every teaching module. So I'll simply say that the recording of Lucy's session will be available within a couple of weeks, and all participants will receive an email saying when this recording is available, so you'll be able to watch it back and hear Lucy's great comments. Lucy, Edwina has asked if you have any strategies to encourage teachers to get enthusiastic about wellbeing policies and actively take part in them. I think sometimes there is a bit of reticence for teachers to get involved. Do you have any strategies? Yes.
Thank you very much for your question, Edwina. I think that goes back to the point that I made earlier about actively involving the teachers in developing the wellbeing policies in the first place, so that if they are involved in that process and they kind of think about what would actually be of use to them, then they're more likely to then actively take part in the initiatives.
I think it goes back to something we were talking about in maybe the previous two sessions about involving the teachers and students in their own in their environment, helping make sure their stakeholders, part of that stakeholder society, that they can feel a valued part of that and be
absolutely
make those choices.
And that can be something as simple as the timing that the initiatives take place. So, for example, there's limited use in organising something in a teacher's lunch break, because obviously they do need to eat as well. So then they will either have to choose between attending the wellbeing activity or eating. So I think it's about thinking about scheduling it so that teachers can actually attend, so that they can make use of it, and so on.
And I think this goes, another question was about, is wellness just about work-life balance? But it seems like it's just so much more than just a work-life balance. It's about a willingness to participate and support each other, that it's a lot more to it than that, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's important to think about things not only from the point of view of being a teacher trainer, but also what the institutions can do themselves, and kind of trying to kind of get them to work more like collaboratively on improving teacher well-being.
And there's a number of questions and comments coming in about just general resourcing, and when you've got maybe a school that is under resourced, and if whether how they can find time to prioritize this. And David makes a question about some issues stemming from observations and the feedback teachers might get, and that if you're only getting, if your feedback for the observation is done very, very quickly, and it can also be quite a problem for teachers' well-being and students.
And again, I think that goes back to what I was saying about managing teacher feedback in a positive way. So not only focusing on the weaknesses in the classroom, often observations take place if there has been an issue with the class, maybe there's been a complaint from a student or something, and therefore the teacher needs to be observed. And then unfortunately it's coming from a negative perspective rather than a more positive perspective, trying to help the teacher to improve their teaching skills, which obviously then has a knock-on effect on their general well-being.
It seems like from the chat there's like everyone's kind of agreeing with these comments, and there are a lot of issues just at the next level up, the kind of maybe management or school level, about how to do this resourcing. And I think talks like this will be really helpful in helping those of us who are working at this session, who then maybe be promoted into management positions, to be aware of that importance of that balance, of that collaboration, of that stakeholder management, just simply making the time and recognizing. I think it's one of the things I really liked you said earlier, was about helping teachers understand when they have a choice. And sometimes we don't know when we've got a choice, and giving ourselves the agency to say, no, actually, I can say no to this. It is okay to say no to this. And I think that was one of the most powerful takeaways for me in this session. So thank you very much, Lucy.
And I think also on that point, Ben, it's about schools and institutions kind of realizing that these things aren't mutually exclusive. So teacher well-being has an impact on student well-being, which then has an impact on their ability to perform and to achieve results, which then affects the institution's reputation positively, and about kind of taking a more holistic approach to that.
I think absolutely, you're all connected. I'm sure we could talk for much longer on this topic, but we'll have to draw it to a close now. So Lucy, thank you again. I'm sure everyone, all the participants, will be happy to share their thanks for this really informative, very helpful session, very thought-provoking session. So thank you once more. I'll just say that in 5 minutes, we've got a professional discussion with Professor Ben Rampton of King's College, talking about the Coalition for Language Education, well-being, one of the many things that we're talking about there. And we've, of course, got a whole afternoon of plenaries and further breakout sessions. So do join us for those. But just now, I'll just like to say one more time, thank you, Lucy, a really engaging talk. Thank you
very much, Ben. Thank you much. Thanks to everyone for coming, and thank you for having me.